home baby was drowning in the water, what mother bear did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sun filtered through the tall pines surrounding the Marshall family cabin, casting dappled shadows across the wooden deck that extended over the edge of Silver Creek. Lily Marshall hummed softly as she arranged freshly picked wildflowers in a mason jar, occasionally glancing at her 15-month-old son, Noah, who played contentedly with wooden blocks on a quilt spread across the deck. The gentle sound of water rushing over smooth stones created a peaceful backdrop to their morning routine. "Look at the water, Noah," Lily said, pointing to a family of ducks gliding along the creek's surface. Noah clapped his chubby hands together, his blue eyes wide with wonder. The Marshalls had moved to this remote cabin in the mountains 3 months ago, after Lily's husband James had accepted a position as the area's wildlife conservation officer. The transition from city life had been challenging, but moments like these, surrounded by nature's simple beauty, made it worthwhile. Inside the cabin, James spoke on the phone with a colleague about recent bear sightings in the area. "Yes, we've spotted a mother and cub about half a mile downstream," he said, his voice carrying through the open window. "They've been keeping their distance, but we should put up additional warning signs for hikers." Unknown to the Marshalls, just beyond the tree line at the edge of their property, a large female black bear watched the cabin with cautious interest. Her dark eyes, intelligent and wary, surveyed the scene. Beside her, a small cub pawed at the ground, sniffing curiously at unfamiliar scents. The mother bear had been ranging farther than usual this season. Food had been scarce, after an unusually dry spring had limited the berry crop. The sound of human voices kept her at a distance, but something about the high-pitched laughter of the human cub stirred an odd recognition within her. Lily stood and stretched. "I forgot the scissors inside," she murmured to herself. "Noah, Mommy will be right back. Stay on the blanket, sweetheart." She ruffled his soft hair before walking toward the cabin door. Noah continued stacking his blocks, babbling happily. A red butterfly fluttered past, catching his attention. With determination in his eyes, Noah pushed himself up and toddled after the colorful insect, his steps still unsteady. The butterfly danced just out of reach, leading him toward the edge of the deck where the wooden railing had a small gap. A repair project James had planned for the weekend. In the trees, the mother bear stiffened. Her keen eyes detected the unsteady movements of the human cub, now dangerously close to the water's edge. Her own cub whimpered, wanting to play, but she held perfectly still, muscles tense. Inside the cabin, Lily searched through a drawer. "James, have you seen the—" Her question was interrupted by the phone ringing. James held up a finger as he took another call, turning away to hear better over the noise of the sink faucet he'd just turned on to fill his water bottle. The butterfly landed on the railing. Noah reached for it, his tiny fingers grasping at air. The wooden plank beneath his feet creaked. One more step, and his small body leaned forward, reaching, until gravity took hold. The splash was surprisingly small for such a momentous event. Noah's cry was cut short as the cold water enveloped him, the current immediately beginning to carry his small body downstream. His red overalls became a bright beacon against the dark water. In the forest, the mother bear made a decision. With a powerful surge, she broke from the tree line, her massive body moving with unexpected grace. Her cub cried out in confusion, but stayed where its mother had left it. The bear's eyes never left the red spot now bobbing in the churning creek. Noah struggled weakly, his little arms flailing. The creek wasn't deep, but for his small frame, it was a deadly trap. The current pushed him further from the cabin, water splashing over his face, his cries becoming desperate gasps. Inside, Lily felt a sudden chill, Mother's intuition piercing through the ordinary morning. "Noah," she called, moving quickly toward the deck. James, still on the phone, noticed her alarm and followed her gaze out the window. What they saw froze them both in place for one terrible second. Their baby in the water, being swept away, and a massive black bear charging toward the creek. "Noah!" Lily's scream tore through the air as she bolted for the door, James right behind her, phone forgotten. The bear reached the water's edge and plunged in without hesitation. Her powerful legs propelled her through the current, closing the distance to the small red form that had now stopped struggling. With unexpected gentleness, she maneuvered her massive body alongside the baby. Using her snout, she nudged Noah's head above water, supporting his tiny body against her own. Lily raced down the sloping yard toward the creek, terror and desperation giving her speed she didn't know she possessed. James sprinted toward a point downstream, hoping to intercept if the current carried Noah further. What happened next would be recounted in whispers of awe for years to come throughout the small mountain community. The mother bear, with deliberate care, used her mouth to grasp the collar of Noah's overalls. With slow, powerful strokes, she swam toward the shore, keeping the baby's face above water. When she reached the shallow edge, she placed Noah gently on the rocky bank, then stepped back, water streaming from her dark fur. Lily arrived seconds later, collapsing beside her son. Noah coughed, water spilling from his mouth, then drew a shuddering breath and began to cry, the most beautiful sound Lily had ever heard. She gathered him into her arms, sobbing with relief. The bear stood motionless, watching. James approached cautiously, torn between protecting his family and acknowledging what had just occurred. The bear's eyes met his, not with aggression, but with something that, had she been human, might have been called understanding. A small cry came from the forest's edge. The bear's cub stood there, confused and frightened by its mother's absence. The mother bear gave one last look at the human family, then turned and lumbered back to her waiting cub. Together, they disappeared into the trees. Lily rocked Noah in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "She saved him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The bear saved our baby." James knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around his wife and son, his own eyes filled with tears. "I've never seen anything like it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's as if she knew." Later, as they sat in the cabin with Noah sleeping peacefully between them, wrapped in warm blankets, Lily struggled to make sense of what had happened. How could a wild animal... James shook his head, still processing. "There are things about these creatures we don't understand. The maternal instinct is powerful, crosses boundaries we can't begin to comprehend." Word spread quickly through the nearby town. Some dismissed it as impossibility, a story embellished by trauma and relief. Others, especially those who had spent lifetimes in these mountains, nodded knowingly. Nature held mysteries beyond human understanding. The following day, as the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, James stood on the newly repaired deck, a camera with a telephoto lens in his hands. In the distance, at the edge of the tree line, the mother bear and her cub appeared briefly. James raised his camera, capturing the moment, not as a wildlife officer, but as a father experiencing profound gratitude. Lily joined him, Noah secure in her arms. "Do you think she knows?" she asked softly. "I believe she does," James replied, watching as the bears vanished once more into the forest. "Somehow, I believe she does." That night, as James uploaded the photographs to his computer, one image stood out. The mother bear looked directly at the camera, her eyes reflecting something that transcended species. A connection, an understanding, perhaps even compassion. It was this photograph that would eventually hang in their living room, a reminder that sometimes the boundaries between wild and human aren't as fixed as we believe. And in the years that followed, whenever Noah asked about the scar on his shoulder, a small mark left by gentle bear teeth that had carried rather than harmed, Lily would tell him the story of the day when the wilderness showed that compassion knows no bounds, and how a mother's love, whether human or bear, can reach across the divide that separates our worlds. The weeks following the incident at Silver Creek passed in a blur for the Marshall family. News of the extraordinary rescue spread beyond their small mountain community, drawing attention they hadn't anticipated. Local newspapers ran the story with headlines like, "Miracle at Silver Creek, Bear Saves Toddler from Drowning." James's photograph of the mother bear became an icon of unexpected compassion in the wild. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the cabin windows, a knock at the door startled the family. James opened it to find a tall man with weathered features and silver-streaked hair standing on their porch. "Name's Henry Blackwood," the man said, his voice gravelly but kind. "I live about 5 miles up the mountain. Heard about what happened with your boy and that mama bear." Lily invited him in, offering coffee while Noah played nearby, seemingly unaffected by his near-drowning experience. Henry settled into a chair, his eyes drifting to the framed photograph of the bear. "That's her, ain't it? The one folks are calling the guardian bear?" James nodded. "That's what they're calling her in town." Henry's gaze lingered on the photograph. "I've been in these mountains 67 years. Seen things most folks wouldn't believe." He sipped his coffee slowly. "That bear, I think I know her." Lily and James exchanged glances. "About 8 years back, I found a bear cub caught in an illegal trap." "Poachers?" Henry continued, disgust evident in his tone. "Mama bear was nearby, frantic. Should have mauled me on sight, but she didn't. Somehow, don't ask me how, she seemed to understand I was trying to help." "You're saying it's the same bear?" James asked, incredulous. Henry shrugged. "Can't be certain, but the markings match. She's got that distinctive patch of lighter fur on her left shoulder." He pointed to the photograph. "Right there." Lily moved closer to examine the image. Sure enough, a lighter patch was visible through the dark fur. "What happened after you freed the cub?" Lily asked. "Released it, backed away slow. Mama bear looked right at me, just like in your picture there, then led her cub away. Never had a bear look at me like that before or since." Henry paused. "Until I saw your photograph." That night, after Henry left and Noah was tucked into bed, James pored over wildlife records in the Conservation Office database. There were scattered reports over the years of a female black bear with unusual behavior, one that seemed to avoid human conflict despite habitat encroachment. Could it be the same animal? What if there's more to these creatures than we've ever understood? James wondered aloud as Lily joined him at the computer. "What are you thinking?" she asked, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "I'm thinking about changing the focus of my research," he said, determination in his voice. "There's something special about this bear, something worth studying." The following morning brought another surprise. A letter arrived from Dr. Elena Vasquez, a renowned wildlife behaviorist from the State University. "She wants to visit," James said, scanning the letter. "She's been studying complex behaviors in bears for decades and says our encounter might provide valuable insights." Lily hesitated. "I don't want Noah to become some kind of research subject, or the bear, for that matter." "I understand," James assured her. But what if this helps protect bears like her, changes how people see them? After careful consideration, they agreed to meet with Dr. Vasquez with clear boundaries established. 2 days later, a slender woman with intelligent eyes and a quick smile arrived at their cabin. Dr. Vasquez spent hours discussing the incident, examining James's photographs, and reviewing the conservation area maps. In my 30 years studying wildlife behavior, I've documented instances of interspecies compassion, but nothing like this, she explained. This goes beyond instinct. It suggests a level of cognitive empathy we don't typically attribute to these animals. What does that mean? Lily asked. It means, Dr. Vasquez said, looking at Noah playing on the floor, that Bear made a choice that defied its natural instincts. Before leaving, Dr. Vasquez made an unexpected proposal, installing wildlife cameras in the area to study the bear's behavior, with the marshal's permission. Non-invasive, she assured them, just observation. James saw the scientific value immediately. Lily was more hesitant but eventually agreed under the condition that the bear's location would remain protected from public knowledge. As spring blossomed into summer, the wildlife cameras captured fascinating footage. The mother bear and her growing cub would occasionally appear at the forest's edge, watching the cabin from a distance. Sometimes, when Noah played in the yard, now safely fenced, the bears would linger longer than usual. It's as if she's checking on him, Lily remarked one evening as they reviewed the footage. But summer also brought new tensions. A development company had purchased land adjacent to the conservation area and planned to build luxury cabins, a project that would disrupt crucial wildlife corridors, including the territory where the mother bear roamed. James came home one evening, his expression troubled. The development plans passed initial approval. Construction could start by fall. Lily felt a knot form in her stomach. What does that mean for the bears? Displaced, most likely. Maybe relocated if they start approaching the construction sites looking for food. James ran a hand through his hair. I've filed objections through official channels, but these companies have deep pockets and good lawyers. That night, as a summer storm rolled through the mountains, Lily woke to a strange sound on the deck. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake James or Noah, and peered through the window. There, illuminated by a flash of lightning, stood the mother bear. Rain streamed down her dark fur as she gazed at the cabin, seemingly untroubled by the storm. For a moment, Lily could have sworn their eyes met through the glass. Then the bear turned and disappeared into the rain-soaked forest. The next morning, Lily found large, muddy paw prints leading up to the deck and back into the woods. When James saw them, he grew concerned. "This is unusual behavior," he said, photographing the prints. "Bears don't typically approach human dwellings without cause." "Maybe she has a cause," Lily suggested softly. "Maybe she senses something's wrong." That afternoon, an emergency call came in to the conservation office. A mother bear and cub had been spotted near the preliminary construction site, where workers were conducting land surveys. The bear wasn't acting aggressively, but her presence had halted work and frightened the survey team. James rushed to the site, heart pounding. When he arrived, he found the mother bear standing at the edge of a clearing, where surveyor stakes and bright orange markers dotted the landscape. Her cub waited in the trees behind her. The survey crew had retreated to their vehicles. "That's her," James confirmed to his colleague, recognizing the distinctive patch on her shoulder. "That's the guardian bear." For nearly an hour the bear remained in place, as if standing in protest against the invasion of her territory. When wildlife management officials arrived with tranquilizer guns, James intervened. "Give me a chance to handle this," he pleaded. This bear has a special history in this area." With cautious approval, James approached the bear slowly, speaking in low, calm tones. The same bear that had saved his son now watched him advance, her dark eyes alert but not aggressive. "I know what you're doing," James said softly, feeling slightly foolish talking to a wild animal yet compelled to try. "But this isn't the way." To the astonishment of everyone present, when James was about 30 feet away, the bear turned and retreated into the forest, her cub following close behind. The incident made the local news that evening. Guardian bear protests construction. Public interest in the story surged anew, with the development company suddenly facing unexpected scrutiny and questions about environmental impact. Dr. Vasquez called that night. "This is unprecedented," she said, her voice excited. "The bear's behavior suggests territorial defense, but the manner is extraordinary. Non-aggressive, but deliberate. Almost like a demonstration." Public sentiment began shifting rapidly. Social media campaigns sprung up overnight. #Save Guardian Bear and #Protect Silver Creek gained traction beyond the local community. Environmental organizations that had been fighting the development found themselves with a powerful new symbol. A bear that had saved a human child was now fighting to save her own home. The development company's representatives reached out to James requesting a meeting. "This publicity is becoming problematic," they admitted. "We'd like to find a compromise." Weeks of tense negotiations followed, with James working alongside environmental advocates and Dr. Vasquez providing scientific testimony about the unique behavioral patterns observed in the guardian bear and the ecological importance of preserving intact wildlife corridors. By late summer, an agreement was reached. The development would be scaled back significantly, with a wide buffer zone established around Silver Creek and the bear's known territory designated as a special conservation area. "It's not a complete victory," James told Lily as they sat on their deck watching the sunset, "but it's more than we could have hoped for 3 months ago." "She saved Noah," Lily said, smiling at their son who was now racing toy cars across the deck. "And now, in a way, we've helped save her." As autumn painted the forest in brilliant hues of red and gold, the wildlife cameras captured less frequent visits from the mother bear and her cub. Dr. Vasquez explained this was normal. They would be preparing for winter, foraging farther afield to build up pet reserves for hibernation. One crisp October morning, Noah pointed excitedly toward the tree line. "Bear! Bear!" he exclaimed, his vocabulary growing daily. Lily followed his gaze and caught a glimpse of dark fur among the trees. She called for James, who brought his camera to the deck just in time to capture one last image of the mother bear. She stood at the forest's edge, her cub, now much larger, beside her. For a brief moment it seemed she was looking directly at Noah, a final check on the human cub she had rescued from the creek. Then, with deliberate grace, she turned and led her cub deeper into the forest, disappearing among the trees that would remain their protected home. That night, as snow began to fall gently outside their window, Lily added a new page to Noah's baby book. Alongside the photograph of the bear, she wrote, "Some bonds transcend words, species, and understanding. Some connections, once formed, reshape the world around them." Winter settled over the mountains, and the marshals knew the bears would be denning until spring. The quiet months gave them time to reflect on how dramatically their lives had changed since moving to the cabin. "Do you ever wonder if it was just coincidence?" James asked one evening as they sat by the fire. "If any bear would have done the same?" Lily watched the flames dance, considering his question. "No," she finally said. "I don't believe it was coincidence. I believe it was connection, something rare and precious that we still don't fully understand. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the forest in a blanket of white, while somewhere beneath it, a mother bear and her cub slept peacefully in their den, unaware of how they had changed the lives of the humans who now watched over their home, as carefully as they had once watched over a small boy named Noah. Spring arrived with a rush of melting snow and swollen streams. Silver Creek, once nearly the site of tragedy, now roared with renewal as winter's frozen grip loosened. The Marshall family had settled into a new routine over the winter months. James had been promoted within the conservation department, now heading a special research initiative focused on bear behavior and human interaction, a position created largely due to the guardian bear story that continued to captivate public interest. Lily had started a blog chronicling their experiences, which had unexpectedly gained thousands of followers. What began as a personal journal had transformed into an influential platform for wildlife conservation awareness. Noah, now approaching his second birthday, had grown into a curious and vibrant toddler with no fear of the outdoors despite his near drowning, though Lily and James remained vigilantly cautious near water. As the forest awakened from its winter slumber, the Marshalls waited eagerly for signs of the bear and her cub. The wildlife cameras had remained active through winter, but as expected, showed no activity near the known den sites. "They should be emerging soon, Doctor," Vasquez told them during her monthly visit. Bears typically den for about 100 days, though it varies with climate and food availability. The first sighting came on a misty April morning. One of the remote cameras captured footage of the mother bear, thinner after her long hibernation, but healthy, leading her now adolescent cub through a meadow of early spring wildflowers. The video showed them pausing to forage for tender shoots and roots, the cub occasionally wrestling playfully with its mother. "They look good," James said with evident relief as he reviewed the footage with Dr. Vasquez. "The cub's grown considerably." "He's not really a cub anymore," Dr. Vasquez corrected. "At this age, we'd call him a yearling. He'll likely stay with his mother through this summer before striking out on his own next year." The thought of the young bear leaving brought an unexpected pang to Lily's heart. She had grown attached to both bears, following their journey through the camera footage. What happened 2 weeks later, however, tested the delicate balance between human compassion and wild nature that the Marshalls had come to respect. The call came at dawn, a frantic message from Henry Blackwood. "Poachers," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Found fresh bait sites and trail cameras that aren't part of your research program. They're targeting bears coming out of hibernation when they're hungry and vulnerable." James was in his truck before the call ended, alerting his conservation team and local law enforcement. Hunting bears was legal in some areas with proper permits and during designated seasons, but poaching, especially using illegal baiting methods and outside of hunting season, carried severe penalties. More importantly to James, it threatened the bears they had worked so hard to protect. The illegal bait sites were found within 2 miles of the Marshall cabin, dangerously close to where the guardian bear had been spotted. Rotting meat laced with sweet attractants hung from trees, with crude camera traps positioned to alert poachers when bears arrived. "They're getting bolder," the local sheriff observed as they documented the sites. "Used to stay way back in the deep wilderness, but the market for bear gallbladders and paws keeps driving them closer to access roads." James felt sick thinking about the bear that had saved his son potentially falling victim to such cruel exploitation. The team dismantled the bait sites and increased patrols, but the damage was done. The poachers now knew bears frequented this area. 3 tense days passed with no sign of trouble. Then, on the 4th morning, one of the legitimate research cameras captured alarming footage. the mother bear investigating the remnants of a bait site. Despite the team's efforts to remove all traces of the attractants, the bear's powerful sense of smell could detect the lingering scents of the removed bait. "We need to monitor the area constantly," James told his team. "These poachers won't give up easily, and she's been drawn to the location now." They established a rotation of conservation officers maintaining a subtle presence near the former bait sites. James took the first watch, setting up a small observation blind where he could monitor activity without disturbing the wildlife. As dusk settled over the forest, movement in the underbrush caught his attention. Through his binoculars, he watched as the mother bear emerged into a small clearing, her yearling close behind. Something about her behavior seemed off. She moved with unusual hesitation, stopping frequently to test the air. The radio at James's hip crackled softly. "Movement on the north ridge," came a colleague's whispered voice. "Two figures with rifles." James felt his heart rate spike. "Maintain position. Law enforcement is en route," he responded, knowing the sheriff's deputies were at least 20 minutes away. Through his binoculars, he could now make out the distant figures moving along the ridgeline. Two men carrying long guns, moving with purpose toward the place where the bears foraged. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The mother bear suddenly stiffened, her head raising sharply. She detected something. Perhaps the scent of the humans on the ridge, or some subtle sound beyond James's perception. With a soft grunt, she nudged her yearling, urging him toward the denser forest. But the yearling, less experienced and more impulsive, hesitated. He'd found something interesting to investigate and resisted his mother's guidance. A sharp crack echoed through the valley. A rifle shot. James watched in horror as the mother bear flinched, a red bloom appearing on her flank. Despite her injury, her first action was to physically push her yearling toward the cover, placing her body between him and the direction of the shot. James radioed his position as he broke cover, firing a warning shot into the air with his service pistol. "Conservation officer, drop your weapons," he shouted, his voice carrying across the valley. The poachers, realizing they'd been spotted, fled back along the ridge. James was torn. Pursue the criminals or help the wounded bear. The decision was made for him when he saw the mother bear collapse at the edge of the clearing, her yearling circling her in obvious distress. "Suspects headed north on the ridge," James reported into his radio. "I'm staying with an injured bear. We need a wildlife veterinarian immediately." He approached the downed bear cautiously, his heart breaking at the sight. The guardian bear lay on her side, breathing heavily, blood darkening her coat. Her yearling made threatening movements toward James, standing protectively over his mother. "I know, buddy," James said softly. "I'm not going to hurt her. I want to help." To James's surprise, the mother bear's eyes found his, showing recognition despite her pain. She made a soft chuffing sound, and remarkably the yearling backed away slightly, not retreating completely, but giving James space to approach. Using his field medical kit, James applied pressure bandages to slow the bleeding. The bullet appeared to have passed through muscle in her shoulder. Painful and serious, but possibly not fatal if treated quickly. 30 agonizing minutes passed before Dr. Vasquez arrived with a wildlife veterinarian. By then, the mother bear's breathing had become more labored, her massive body shivering despite the mild spring air. "She's going into shock," the veterinarian said, quickly preparing a tranquilizer. "We need to stabilize her and transport her to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center." The yearling became increasingly agitated as strangers gathered around his mother. It took all of James's focus to keep the young bear from charging the medical team. "He won't leave her," Dr. Vasquez observed. "The bond is too strong." A difficult decision was made. They would need to tranquilize both bears. The yearling, though distressed, would be released immediately in familiar territory after a quick health check. The mother would need surgery and recovery time at the rehabilitation facility. As the medical team worked to stabilize the mother bear for transport, James received word that sheriff's deputies had intercepted one of the poachers attempting to flee in a truck parked on a logging road. The second suspect had escaped on foot, but was being tracked by officers with dogs. News of the guardian bear's injury spread rapidly through the community. By nightfall, dozens of local residents had gathered at the rehabilitation center, holding a candlelight vigil for the bear that had become their symbol of hope and connection. Lily arrived with Noah, her eyes red from crying. "How could anyone do this?" she asked, watching through a window as veterinarians worked on the massive bear in a specially designed medical bay. "Greed," James said simply, his voice tight with anger and worry. "The black market value of bear parts in some countries." He trailed off, not wanting to continue the thought in front of Noah. After 3 hours of surgery, the lead veterinarian emerged with cautious optimism. "The bullet damaged muscle tissue but missed major blood vessels and bones. She's stable, but the next 48 hours will be critical." For 2 days, James barely left the rehabilitation center. The staff, moved by the story of Noah's rescue, allowed the family special access. Noah, too young to understand the complexity of the situation, simply pointed at the sedated bear and repeated, "My bear sleeping." On the 3rd day, the mother bear showed signs of improvement, her vital signs strengthening. The rehabilitation center's director explained they would need to keep her for at least 2 weeks before considering release. "And the yearling?" Lily asked. They had released the young bear in familiar territory near the cabin after his examination showed he was healthy. "That's our concern," the director admitted. "Young bears his age still depend on their mothers for teaching and protection. He knows how to forage, but he'll be vulnerable to territorial adult males without her." The wildlife cameras near the Marshall cabin captured heartbreaking footage over the following days. The yearling returned repeatedly to the last place he had seen his mother, calling for her with distinctive moaning sounds that carried through the forest. He appeared increasingly disheveled and uncertain, searching familiar feeding grounds with diminished enthusiasm. After a week of this behavior, Henry Blackwood reported seeing the yearling dangerously close to a residential area on the other side of the valley, where unsecured garbage provided an easy food source. "If he starts associating humans with food, you know how that ends," Henry warned James grimly. James knew all too well. Bears that became habituated to human food sources often became problem bears, eventually leading to their relocation or euthanasia if they became aggressive. The situation reached a turning point when the yearling was spotted in the backyard of a vacation home, attempting to access a poorly secured garbage can. The homeowner, unfamiliar with proper bear protocol, had tried to scare the animal away by shouting and throwing objects, causing the yearling to display defensive behavior that could be interpreted as aggression. Emergency calls flooded the conservation office. Some residents demanded the dangerous bear be removed immediately, while others, familiar with the guardian bear story, pleaded for patience and education. James found himself in the difficult position of balancing public safety with his personal connection to these bears. After consulting with wildlife management experts, a controversial decision was reached. They would attempt to capture the yearling and reunite him with his mother at the rehabilitation facility. An unconventional approach, but one that recognized the unique circumstances and the bear's significance to the community. The capture operation was delicate and tense. Using food attractants within a humane trap, they successfully contained the yearling after 2 failed attempts. He was sedated for transport, examined, and found to be malnourished but otherwise healthy. The reunion at the Rehabilitation Center was filmed for research purposes with James' doctor, Vasquez and the veterinary team watching nervously from behind a protective barrier. The mother bear, now able to move around a secured recovery enclosure, instantly recognized her yearling as he was released from the transport cage. What followed brought tears to the eyes of even the most experienced wildlife professionals present. The mother bear approached her yearling slowly, sniffing him thoroughly, then began gently grooming him with her tongue, much as she would have when he was a tiny cub. The yearling pressed against her, making soft sounds of distress that gradually subsided as they reconnected. "Extraordinary," Dr. Vasquez whispered, "this level of emotional response and recognition." The Rehabilitation Center adapted their protocols to accommodate the unique situation, creating a secluded recovery space where both bears could remain together during the mother's healing process. The mother bear's recovery accelerated noticeably after her yearling's arrival, her appetite improving and her engagement with her surroundings increasing. Meanwhile, the legal case against the captured poacher progressed. Evidence found in his vehicle linked him to an international wildlife trafficking ring that had been targeting black bears throughout the region. The publicity surrounding the Guardian Bear case brought unprecedented attention to the issue of poaching, leading to increased funding for anti-poaching efforts and stricter penalties being proposed at the state level. As the mother bear's release date approached, a new challenge emerged. The Rehabilitation Center's policy typically mandated releasing recovered animals in remote areas, away from the human activities that had endangered them in the first place. Yet, in this case, the bear's established territory was near the Marshall cabin and the now protected conservation area. James advocated strongly for returning them to their home range. "This isn't a typical case," he argued to wildlife management officials. "These bears have demonstrated exceptional behavior and adaptation to coexisting with humans at a distance. Relocating them to unfamiliar territory would subject them to territorial conflicts with other bears and unknown food sources." After lengthy deliberation, approval was granted for a conditional release back to their original territory, with intensive monitoring requirements and the understanding that any signs of problematic behavior would trigger reevaluation. The release day dawned clear and warm in early June. A small gathering of officials, researchers, and the Marshall family assembled at a carefully selected location within the bear's home range, far enough from human residences to give the animals space, yet close enough to familiar feeding grounds to ease their transition. 2 transport cages sat side by side in a sunny clearing, the bears inside now fully awake and aware of their surroundings. Noah watched wide-eyed from James's arms as the cage doors were opened remotely. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, cautiously, the mother bear emerged, her coat glossy and healthy, the wound on her flank now a healing scar partially hidden by fur. She tested the air, scanning her surroundings with alert eyes before making a soft vocalization to her yearling, who bounded out behind her. The bears paused, seeming to get their bearings. The mother bear's gaze swept across the assembled humans, lingering briefly on the Marshall family. Noah waved excitedly. "Bye-bye, bear," he called out. As if in response, the mother bear stood up on her hind legs, towering at her full height, a behavior that would typically be interpreted as threatening, but somehow, in this context, felt more like acknowledgment. Then she dropped to all fours and led her yearling toward the shelter of the forest, both bears disappearing into the green shadows of their home. "Will they be okay?" Lily asked softly as they watched the bears vanish from view. Dr. Vasquez smiled. "They have each other. They're in familiar territory, and they have an entire community looking out for them. I'd say their chances are excellent." The months that followed brought a new sense of purpose to the Marshall family. James's research initiative expanded, bringing scientific attention to bear behavior and cognition. Lily's blog evolved into a nonprofit foundation dedicated to promoting coexistence between humans and wildlife. The development company, recognizing the positive publicity value, donated additional land to expand the protected corridor around Silver Creek. The wildlife cameras continued to capture the bear's journeys, the mother teaching her yearling to strip bark from trees, to find the richest berry patches, to fish in the deeper pools of Silver Creek. They remained appropriately wary of humans, keeping their distance from the cabin and other residences, yet occasionally appeared at the forest's edge when the Marshalls were outside, as if checking in on their human neighbors. By late summer, an unexpected development captured the community's attention. The wildlife cameras revealed the mother bear was now accompanied not only by her yearling, but by a large male bear. Unusual behavior, as adult males typically avoided females outside of mating season and were often aggressive toward cubs and yearlings. "This is fascinating, Doctor," Vasquez explained as they reviewed the footage. "Based on his distinctive markings, we believe this is the same male who was documented as her mate last breeding season. Black bear pairs don't typically stay together, yet they've been observed traveling and foraging together for over 2 weeks now," James noted, watching footage of the 3 bears foraging peacefully together. "Another departure from typical behavior patterns," Dr. Vasquez agreed. "We're seeing social adaptations here that challenge our understanding of bear family dynamics." As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and the urgency of pre-hibernation foraging, the unusual bear family remained together. The wildlife research community had taken notice, with Dr. Vasquez's preliminary papers on the guardian bear case drawing significant attention at conferences. One crisp October morning, almost identical to the day the year before when they had last seen the bears before hibernation, the Marshall family sat having breakfast on their deck. Noah, now a talkative toddler with his father's curiosity and his mother's gentle spirit, suddenly pointed toward the tree line. "Look, bear's watching us." James and Lily followed his gesture. There, at the forest's edge, stood not 2 but 3 bears. The mother, her now nearly grown yearling, and the large male. They stood motionless, gazing toward the cabin in what could only be described as deliberate observation. Lily reached for James's hand. It's like they came to say goodbye before winter. For several long moments, the 2 families, one human, one bear, regarded each other across the distance that separated their worlds, yet somehow didn't divide them. Then, with the female bear leading, they turned and disappeared into the forest depths, where they would soon find a den for the coming winter months. That evening, as James updated the research log, he found himself struggling to maintain scientific objectivity. "The observed behavior continues to suggest recognition and intentionality beyond documented patterns," he wrote, before pausing and adding, "There remains something unexplained in the connection formed through the rescue event, something that transcends our current understanding of interspecies relationships." Lily read over his shoulder and smiled. "Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we admit there are things we don't yet understand." As the first snow fell outside their window, Noah brought them his favorite book. A children's story Lily had written about a brave mother bear who saved a little boy from a rushing stream. The illustrations, created by a local artist, captured the gentle strength in the bear's eyes that James had photographed that first day. "Again?" James asked with a smile, though he already knew the answer. "Again," Noah confirmed, snuggling between his parents as the fire crackled and snow continued to fall, covering the forest in a blanket of white that would keep its secrets until spring returned once more. Somewhere beneath that blanket, 3 bears slept peacefully in a den, their breathing synchronized in the darkness, while above them 3 humans cherished the story that had brought them all together. A story of boundaries crossed, of compassion unleashed, of the mysterious connections that bind all living things in ways science was only beginning to understand. And in that shared slumber, beast and human alike, perhaps they all dreamed of Silver Creek, where water once carried a child toward peril, and then, through one bear's inexplicable choice, toward a future none of them could have imagined. Years passed, seasons turning like pages in a well-loved book. Noah Marshall grew from a toddler into a boy with sun-streaked hair and eyes that held the same curiosity about the natural world that had once led him to the water's edge. Now, 8 years old, he moved through the forest with quiet confidence, his parents always nearby, but gradually allowing him more freedom to explore the wilderness he called home. The guardian bear and her family had become legends in the region. Though they were seen less frequently as the years progressed, the wildlife cameras occasionally captured glimpses of them. The mother bear now showing touches of gray around her muzzle. Her offspring fully grown and independent, but still occasionally returning to forage in familiar territory. The male bear had remained with the female far longer than biology would have predicted, another fascinating anomaly that had contributed to Dr. Vasquez's groundbreaking research on bear social structures. On a golden afternoon in late September, Noah's 8th birthday, the Marshall family hiked to a special overlook above Silver Creek. The trail wound through sun-dappled forest before opening to a rocky promontory that offered sweeping views of the valley. The conservation area had expanded over the years, now protecting thousands of acres surrounding Silver Creek, a direct result of the guardian bear's story and the community action it had inspired. "This is it," James said as they reached the overlook. "The perfect spot." Noah ran ahead to the edge, where a simple stone bench had been installed. Carved into its surface was an image of a mother bear with a small human child, an artistic representation of the rescue that had changed everything. Below it, a small bronze plaque read, "In honor of unexpected compassion and the connections that transcend our understanding. Silver Creek Conservation Area, established 2025. "Is this my birthday surprise?" Noah asked, running his fingers over the carved stone. Lily smiled, unpacking a picnic from her backpack. "Part of it. The bench was just installed last week. Your dad designed it. The conservation department wanted something to mark the overlook," James explained. "And since it was largely your story that helped create this protected area, it seemed fitting." They settled on the bench, sharing sandwiches and birthday cupcakes, as the afternoon sun bathed the valley in warm light. Below them, Silver Creek wound like a silver ribbon through the landscape. Peaceful now in late summer, but a reminder of how quickly calm waters could turn dangerous. "Do you remember anything about it?" Noah asked suddenly, his voice quiet. "About when I fell in, about the bear?" James and Lily exchanged glances. Noah rarely asked about the incident, though he knew the story well, both from their telling and from the children's book Lily had written, which had unexpectedly become a bestseller and was now used in schools to teach children about wildlife conservation. "You were so little," Lily said gently. "Not even 2 years old, but sometimes I think you do remember in some way. You've never been afraid of bears, even after knowing what happened." Noah nodded thoughtfully, brushing crumbs from his lap. "I dream about it sometimes. Not about falling or being scared. I dream about feeling safe, warm fur, being carried." He looked embarrassed. "Is that weird?" James wrapped an arm around his son's shoulders. "Not weird at all. Some experiences imprint on us deeply, even if we don't have conscious memories of them." As they packed up their picnic, a flash of movement in the valley below caught Lily's attention. "James," she whispered, pointing. "Look." In a meadow beside Silver Creek, 3 dark shapes moved through the tall grass. A female bear with distinctive gray around her muzzle, a younger adult bear that must have been her offspring, and surprisingly an even younger bear, a cub, perhaps a year old. "Is that—" Lily began. James already had his binoculars raised. "It's her, and that's a new cub with her and her older offspring." He handed the binoculars to Noah. "Take a look, buddy. That's the guardian bear, and it appears her first cub, now grown, has stayed in her territory and had a family of their own. 3 generations all together. It's almost unheard of in black bears." Noah watched in awe as the bears foraged peacefully below. "They're like us," he said simply. "A family." As they observed, the older female bear suddenly paused, raising her head as if sensing something. She turned, looking directly up toward the overlook where the Marshall family stood. Even from this distance, there was a palpable moment of connection, of recognition that transcended the years and the space between them. "She knows we're here," Noah whispered with absolute certainty. For several heartbeats, the bear remained still, gazing upward. Then she made a soft sound, gathering her family with gentle nudges, and led them toward the shelter of the forest. At the tree line, she paused once more, looking back at the humans on the overlook before disappearing into the shadows with her family. The sun was beginning to set as the Marshalls made their way back down the trail toward home. Noah walked ahead, occasionally stopping to examine interesting plants or rocks along the path. James and Lily followed hand in hand, watching their son with quiet pride. "He's so at ease out here," Lily observed. "Sometimes I think about how different things might have been if the bear hadn't been there that day." James squeezed her hand. "But she was. And look at everything that's come from that moment, this protected wilderness. Noah's connection to nature, your books, my research. One act of unexpected compassion rippling outward, changing everything it touches." When they reached the cabin, a surprise awaited them. Parked outside were several familiar vehicles: Dr. Vasquez's SUV, Henry Blackwood's old truck, and cars belonging to other friends from the community. On the deck, a banner read, "Happy Birthday, Noah," and a small gathering of people who had been touched by the guardian bear story over the years waited to celebrate. As evening settled over the mountains, the group gathered around a campfire in the Marshall's yard. Noah, surrounded by birthday gifts, mostly books about wildlife and conservation, listened wide-eyed as Henry Blackwood told stories of the mountains in his youth. "You know," Henry said, his weathered face lit by the dancing flames, "I've lived in these mountains my whole life, seen things most folks would never believe. But what happened with you and that bear, young man, that's something special. Something that reminds us we don't have all the answers." Dr. Vasquez nodded in agreement. "Science can explain so much about animal behavior. Protective instincts, maternal responses, even altruism within species. But what happened here goes beyond easy classification. Sometimes we need to be humble enough to recognize that there are connections in this world we're still learning to understand." As stars appeared in the darkening sky, conversations flowed around the fire. Stories of other remarkable animal encounters, discussions about conservation efforts expanding to neighboring valleys, plans for educational programs at local schools. The guardian bear's story had created ripples that continued to spread outward, touching lives and changing perspectives about the relationship between humans and wildlife. When the guests had departed and Noah had gone to bed, surrounded by his new books, James and Lily stood on their deck, gazing at the forest that had become so much more than simply the place they lived. It was a place of miracles and mysteries, of connections formed and lessons learned. "I was thinking about Noah's question earlier," Lily said softly, "about whether he remembers being rescued. I've been wondering something all these years, but never quite found the words to ask." "What's that?" James asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "That day, when you saw the bear looking at you after she placed Noah on the shore, what did you see in her eyes?" "Really?" James was quiet for a long moment, remembering. "Recognition," he finally said. "Not just animal awareness, but something deeper. As if, in that moment, the boundaries between our worlds thinned. As if she was showing me that compassion isn't uniquely human. It's something deeper, older, more fundamental than our categories and classifications." He gazed into the darkness of the forest. "I think that's why this story has touched so many people. It challenges our assumptions about what separates us from the natural world." Inside the cabin, Noah had gotten out of bed and stood at his window, looking out at the forest. The nearly full moon cast silver light across the landscape, illuminating the path that led from their yard into the trees. In the distance, he thought he saw movement. Perhaps deer, perhaps his imagination, perhaps something else entirely. He pressed his palm against the cool glass, remembering the strange sensation from his dreams, of being carried, held safe, by something both powerful and gentle. He didn't have the words yet to fully understand what had happened to him as a toddler, how it had shaped his life and the lives of so many others. But he felt it. A connection to something larger than himself, a thread that bound him to the wilderness and its creatures in ways that went beyond explanation. "Thank you," he whispered to the moonlit forest, not feeling foolish at all. Somehow, he knew his message would be received, carried on the night air to where a mother bear might be leading her family through familiar pathways, beneath the same moon, within the same web of life. Morning dawned clear and bright. Noah woke early, slipping quietly outside while his parents still slept. The grass was heavy with dew as he made his way to the edge of the yard, stopping at the boundary where their human space met the wilderness. He often came here to watch for wildlife. Deer browsing at dawn, foxes slipping through the underbrush, birds flitting from branch to branch. Today, the forest was quiet except for the morning songs of birds. Noah sat cross-legged in the grass, patient and still as his father had taught him. The sun rose higher, warming his shoulders as he waited, though for what, he wasn't entirely sure. A twig snapped in the forest. Noah held his breath, remaining motionless. At the edge of the trees, a shadow moved, and then another, a smaller one beside it. The guardian bear emerged partially from the shelter of the forest, her cub close beside her. They stood at the boundary, watching the boy who watched them, separated by space but connected by a shared history written in water and courage and compassion. Noah's heart pounded, but he wasn't afraid. Slowly, carefully, he raised one hand in a small wave. The mother bear remained still, her dark eyes reflecting the morning light. The cub, curious, took a half-step forward before its mother gently blocked its path with her paw. A lesson about boundaries, about respecting the necessary distance between their worlds. For one breathtaking moment, boy and bear regarded each other across that distance, a distance that preserved the wildness that made the bears who they were, yet somehow didn't diminish the connection that had been forged years ago in the rushing waters of Silver Creek. Then, with deliberate grace, the mother bear turned and led her cub back into the forest, disappearing among the trees that were their rightful home. Noah remained sitting in the dew-soaked grass, understanding washing over him like the gentle current of the creek during peaceful times. This was the true lesson of his extraordinary experience. Not that wild and human could become the same, but that they could recognize each other across their differences. That compassion could flow between separate worlds without requiring those worlds to merge. When James and Lily found him there some time later, they didn't need to ask what had happened. They simply sat beside their son, the three of them gazing at the forest together, part of a story still unfolding. A story about learning to see ourselves reflected in unexpected places, about the courage to reach across boundaries when it matters most, and about the profound understanding that sometimes the greatest connections are formed when we respect both our profound similarities and our necessary differences. In the years that followed, as Noah grew into a young man who would eventually follow in his father's footsteps as a wildlife conservationist, the story of the guardian bear would be told and retold throughout the region and beyond. It would inspire conservation efforts, research initiatives, educational programs, and countless personal transformations as people reconsidered their relationship with the natural world. And on quiet mornings in the peaceful valley surrounding Silver Creek, a mother bear and her descendants would continue to roam the forest that remained their protected home, wild and free, separate yet connected to the humans who had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that in a world too often defined by divisions, compassion remains the most powerful force for healing the arbitrary boundaries we create between ourselves and the magnificent web of life to which we all belong.